Lovin' and longin' and pinin', oh my! Welcome back, friends. It's Moomin time. Moominvalley. We just can't get enough of it. With the release of Season 3, we have gotten to explore even more of those wonderful characters and the lively valley they live in. In my previous video on the series, I've discussed Moomintroll's latest steps in his journey of becoming his own Moomin, slowly but surely establishing his independence, taking bigger risks, and deepening his bonds with the people around him. But as we all know, another very important part of this show is Moomintroll's relationship with his best friend Snufkin, who also goes through his own character arcs each season and learns his own set of lessons as well. With the previous season ending on a bit of a cliffhanger, I think we've all been waiting excitedly for the conclusion to that particular storyline. And I've gotta say, I'm beyond happy with the direction this season has taken, with all of its unwinding twists and turns. Without further ado, let's jump right into it and follow this pathway that will hopefully lead us back to what we've all been missing since we last took this walk. I wanna talk about Moominvalley. Before we talk about Snufkin's arcs in Season 3, let's take a brief trip down memory lane and remind ourselves of how we got here in the first place. Snufkin is a wanderer who resides in Moominvalley for most of the year. He is a free spirit who deeply values his right to come and go as he pleases. While most of the valley hibernates during the winter, Snufkin has his own tradition of setting off on a lonely winter journey once the snow starts to fall, only returning when spring arrives. And even then, he is known to take a couple of detours before officially making his way back to the valley. Meanwhile, in that very valley, he is eagerly awaited by his best friend Moomintroll, who will join Snufkin on their own set of adventures as they hang out during the warmer seasons. That is the basic picture painted by the Moomin franchise in general, and by this series specifically. In Season 1, we saw a Snufkin that seemed to have full control over his life and what exactly he wanted from it. Whenever a situation arises that makes him uncomfortable, he removes himself from it, once again pursuing his own freedom. He opposes anyone who threatens that freedom, and while he prefers to be the one calling the shots, he doesn't necessarily see himself as a leader. He is cool and collected, never letting his feelings get the best of him. However, we also saw a Snufkin who was afraid of being forgotten, especially because of how he withheld his affection. He doesn't exactly know how to deal with admiration, and sees any emotional advances as a threat to his personal freedom. This causes him to appear closed off, never allowing himself to let his true colors show, or to accept the love that is so generously being offered to him. In Season 2, we also saw some of these patterns being repeated. When the hobgoblin threatened the valley, Snufkin felt uncomfortable, so he left. When he is making his way back to the valley, he takes a detour to help a fire spirit, and when the spirit shows him kindness in return, Snufkin gets overwhelmed, because he is not used to accepting this kind of affection. The second season culminates with the November episode, where we see Snufkin being the one missing his dear friend and earnestly awaiting his return. This season ends with him rushing to the beach in the hopes of seeing Moomintroll once more, fervently staring at a light at the edge of the horizon. Season 3 starts with the Moomins coming back from their island journey, but Moomintroll is not among them. Snufkin clarifies to the returning voyagers that the light he saw at the end of November was actually brought by the Hattifatteners, who have taken up residence in the Moomin house. The Moomin family struggles to adjust to life back on the valley, mostly because Sniff became a cult leader, as one does, and now the locals are split between those who value ultimate freedom and carefree living, and those who want societal rules to be enforced and respected. Moomin Mama is the one most affected by this struggle, because she's trying to keep the peace by pleasing both sides and encouraging them to coexist in harmony, but the members of each faction keep being mean to one another. As she goes to the beach to unwind after a particularly stressful episode, she runs into Snufkin, who tells her that, while storms may come and go, the valley will always be there. This reflects how Snufkin sees the valley as stability. Even if he values freedom and spontaneity, he relies on the valley remaining there for him as a safe place to return to when he is done with his travels. The conflict is resolved when both sides realize they were being silly by taking their own ideas to the extreme, and they make peace with each other. Moomin Mama is pleased that the storm has passed them by, and Little Mai asks her why she didn't just pick a side. Moomin Mama replies that she doesn't like made-up borders between people. True harmony can be found with patience, compromise, and communication. This is a bit of a recurring theme this season. Throughout the episodes, you have different characters learning to understand each other's varied points of view and coming to conclusions and attitudes that can help them live with one another in a respectful and kinder way. This is also true for Snufkin's character, and it's also manifested in a way through this very first episode. Usually, it's Moomintroll who welcomes us into the new season and waits for Snufkin's return. But in Season 3, we have Snufkin welcoming the Moomins back into the valley and waiting for Moomintroll to come back from his journey. It's a shift in perspective that had been carefully built over the previous 2 seasons. In Episode 2, Moomintroll comes back, and the friends reunite once more. They can now spend the rest of the seasons going on their adventures and enjoying all the thrills that the valley has to offer, as they always do. But winter comes along, as it always does too, and Snufkin heads out for the mountains, as he too always does. Except this time, Moomintroll is coming along. This poses a problem, because now Moomintroll is the one calling the shots. Leaving used to be Snufkin's choice alone, and by choosing to leave, he sealed Moomintroll's fate as well. After all, for Snufkin to be as alone as he wishes, it means Moomintroll has to stay behind. And Moomintroll usually does, even because he spends most of the winter hibernating. But he had been growing more and more against hibernation as he built his own independence, so now he wants to decide for himself. He is leaving to find Snufkin. He hikes his way up to the Lonely Mountains and finds the cave where Snufkin had taken shelter, quickly making himself at home. Maybe a little too much so. Snufkin tries to be friendly at first, but it's clear that Moomintroll's presence is making him uncomfortable. As it turns out, winter for Snufkin is a time for quiet contemplation, while Moomintroll sees it as just another opportunity to chat and sing together. And here, one of Snufkin's main tendencies shows its face. He is uncomfortable, so he is going to leave. He tries sneaking out of the cave while Moomintroll is asleep, leaving behind a letter explaining he's going away again, but he stubs his toe on the way out, waking his friend up. And here, another tendency of Snufkin's makes itself known. He snaps. While Snufkin is mostly known for his cool and collected persona, he has had his share of angry outbursts in the past. The most notable example is when he meets Titi-Woo back in Season 1, and the creature started asking him about the valley and his relationship with Moomintroll in particular. Snufkin hates acknowledging his own feelings as much as he would try to deny it, so that conversation hit him pretty hard. Here, we have a similar situation. Much like Titi-Woo was trying to get closer to the Wanderer by asking him personal questions, Moomintroll was trying to get closer to Snufkin by sharing his personal space, and Snufkin couldn't handle it. He yells at Moomintroll, saying his friend's company is too much and that he wants to be left alone. Moomintroll leaves, but not before calling Snufkin out. He says it's all fine and dandy when you're the one who decides to leave, but it's no fun being the one who's left behind. After Moomintroll leaves, we actually see the story play out exactly like in Season 1 when Snufkin meets Titi-Woo. In Season 1, Snufkin snapped at the creature, then got worried about it, and rushed through the woods in search of it. Now, in Season 3, Snufkin snapped at Moomintroll, got worried about his friend, and rushed through the mountains to reach him. Fortunately, Moomintroll is fine, but unfortunately, an avalanche traps Snufkin on a cliffside, so now his friend has to save him. Except Moomintroll is not very good at saving people, so they both end up trapped together. As they get a moment to collect their thoughts, Snufkin confesses that when he is alone, he actually thinks about Moomintroll all the time and misses his friend dearly. This conversation is interrupted by Moomin's papa and mama, who rescue the two boys as the storm dies down. Moomintroll offers to leave, moving past his argument with Snufkin and realizing it's best if he lets his friend have some alone time. But it's Snufkin who has a change of heart, triggered by seeing the statue Moomintroll carved of him and his best friend together, so he supposedly asks Moomintroll to stay. They watch the northern lights together, quietly, in symphony.
And I scream into the heavens and have a fit!
This is huge. This is massive. Snufkin is making room for his friend in his rituals and his heart. They are finding balance together, with Moomintroll letting Snufkin have some space, and with Snufkin giving him a space to occupy in his life. It's fantastic. I can't get over it. So now that we have dealt with Snufkin's loner tendencies, all that's left is to tackle that pesky avoidance of responsibility. In episode 10, we meet a Hemulin who owns an amusement park but isn't so thrilled about that fact. After a storm destroys the park and Snufkin just so happens to be kinda standing there, the Hemulin bequeaths the park to Snufkin and decides he's done with that business. Now all the woodland creatures think Snufkin is responsible for the park and keep pestering him so that he can fix the rides. Snufkin does not like that one bit. He never wanted a park, he doesn't want to work for those kids, and he doesn't want to rebuild any rides. Unsure of what to do, he flees back to the valley and runs into Moomintroll, who takes the lead and gathers his friends so they can restore the park to its former glory. It takes him a lot of effort and a bit of secret help from the previous park owner, but they get the rides working again and the kids rejoice. All seems to be well, but the cracks soon start to show in this wondrous carnival. The rides break for seemingly no reason, the friends keep arguing over how to run things, and Snufkin doesn't want to deal with any of that. And here, we go back to the Snufkin we've always known. The same Snufkin who, in Season 2, did not want to deal with the problem of the hobgoblin, so instead just left the valley, knowing his great friend Moomintroll would probably deal with the guy just fine. Moomintroll had already stepped up as the leader, and even did Snufkin the kindness of checking if the Wanderer was okay with that, so surely he could handle this one just fine too, right? Well, no. This is Season 3, baby. Moomintroll is speaking out. He rightfully calls Snufkin out once more, saying that Snufkin has no right to keep avoiding his responsibilities and forcing his friends to deal with them. Snufkin barely even helped to get the park running again, a mess that was very much his to deal with. Snufkin is shocked to be reprimanded and he tries making amends, but Moomintroll is still mad. After a bunch more arguing, breaking safety protocols, and crash landing into the jungle, they put their differences aside to catch the person breaking the rides and start running the park with better harmony. Snufkin makes peace with his new fate and plays into the role he's been assigned. While in Season 1 we had Snufkin versus the park keeper, in Season 3 we have Snufkin becoming a park keeper. The Hemulin from the start of the episode comes back and decides to keep running the park, having realized a life with no responsibility is a rather boring one. It is possible to see a parallel between this Hemulin and Snufkin himself. They both prefer silence over noise for one, and there's also the fact that the Hemulin never wanted to run the park, so he just dumped that role onto the first person he could, much like Snufkin didn't want that either and tried dumping it onto his friend as well. The Hemulin coming back mirrors how Snufkin also stopped avoiding his duties, and they even learned to appreciate the sound of laughing children a little more. It's not like Snufkin avoided responsibility altogether in the past. He also chose to go on missions out of his own volition, and there was that time in Season 2 where he paused his journey back home to take a fire spirit back to the volcano. But those are all things Snufkin chooses to do. He is fine with responsibility as long as he is the one in charge of how much he has to work. When something is imposed on him, he doesn't want to deal with it. This episode is important because it helps Snufkin understand that he can't always be the one calling all the shots. Sometimes he has to relinquish some of his personal freedom in order to help the group, much like his friends also make that sacrifice for him. Snufkin has learned some great lessons along this season, and it's clear to see how he is becoming a more altruistic individual, also understanding how to be a better friend. But as always, this isn't the end of the story. The thing about his journey is that it has a very important catalyst. The yin to Snufkin's yang, our very own Moomintroll. Their relationship is one of, if not the most complex in the series, and it's the biggest drive for change in both of their character arcs. In the past, Snufkin was known for withholding his affection. He was cool and collected, never letting his true feelings shine, and Moomintroll greatly admired him. He came to him for both advice and adventure, and often tried to be just as cool as his best friend. But Moomintroll also put Snufkin on a bit of a pedestal. He loved his friend so much he acted as though Snufkin could do no wrong. Watching him leave deeply saddened him, but Moomintroll felt like he couldn't say anything, because he figured that was just the way things were fated to be. Whenever he was upset, he saw it not as something he could fix, but almost as an intrinsically personal failure. Something terribly wrong that he had no way of changing, but that was a fault entirely on his end. Because Snufkin never feels sad. So if Moomintroll feels sad, there must be a problem with him. Snufkin is greatly opposed to the idea of possession, especially when it comes to himself. In Season 1, we saw Moomintroll love a dragon in a manner that was entirely possessive, and the dragon hated it. And the episode went out of its way to show that Snufkin and the dragon were one and the same. When the hobgoblin, a terribly possessive wizard, threatened to come to the valley, Snufkin was so appalled by this idea, he chose to leave entirely. But Snufkin is so deep into his own loner persona that he sees any manifestation of love as possession. When his relationship with Moomintroll is brought into question by Tiriwoo, Snufkin gets incredibly defensive, because the mere act of acknowledging his best friend means a lot to him feels too personal, too suffocating. He fabricates his own distance, afraid that if he lets people get too close, he will lose the sense of who he is. He has defined himself so much by his lack of attachments that he can't bring himself to admit he has grown attached to something. This actually ties back to his fear of responsibility a bit, because to love someone in a mutual and balanced relationship demands a lot of responsibility. You have to consider the feelings of the other person just as much as they consider yours, and you can't keep making all of the decisions and expecting your partner to be fine with it. Sometimes you have to compromise. And in the past, we saw Snufkin that, when made to feel any kind of discomfort, would just leave, regardless of who he was hurting in the process. He did not take Moomintroll's feelings into consideration, and worst of all, he made Moomintroll feel like he was the one in the wrong. On Moomintroll's side of the journey, he became more independent and self-assured. He also became a little bit more like Snufkin, setting off on his own adventures, being the one to leave instead of being left behind. In becoming more like Snufkin, Moomintroll realized that, as much as he loved his friend, Snufkin was just some guy. Snufkin wasn't perfect, much like Moomintroll wasn't, and neither of them had to be. But Moomintroll started demanding that Snufkin put as much effort into this relationship as Moomintroll himself was putting. And to Snufkin's credit, he did get better at doing that. He also became a bit like his best friend, acting as a kind host to those lost souls from the valley and longing for his friend to return from the winter. When Moomintroll arrives, Snufkin greets him with a hug, and Moomintroll hugs him back. echoing their first encounter on the first season and showing how far they have come. Snufkin's issue was that, to him, the line between love and possession was too thin, and those concepts started to get muddled. To be fair, Moomintroll did have some possessive tendencies when it came to ideas of love, but Snufkin would never learn just how far those tendencies truly went unless he allowed himself to be loved. He kept his distance because he didn't want to be held down, but in doing so, he came off as utterly unloving. But then, the Lonely Mountain episode brings us a massive revelation. The love had always been there. Snufkin confesses that when he goes away for the winter, he actually thinks of Moomintroll all the time. He misses his friend just as much as his friend misses him. So really, the winter experiences of both characters, which once appeared so opposite, are actually much closer than we thought. They are both separated by distance and both spend their days missing one another. The difference is that Snufkin was the force behind the separation, while Moomintroll had the separation forced upon him. When Moomintroll gathers the courage to go after Snufkin, he is showing that he gets as much of a say in this relationship as Snufkin does. If Snufkin can choose to go, then Moomintroll can choose that too. This is, of course, only possible because Moomintroll started seeing Snufkin and himself as equals, and Snufkin needed to learn that lesson as well. He and Moomintroll both have a desire for company, and should share equal rights in acting upon those desires. It isn't right for Snufkin to be the only one dictating when they get to be together. Once again, the answer is found in balance. Snufkin lets Moomintroll stay, respecting his need to be together, and Moomintroll learns to keep more quiet, being respectful of his friend's need for silent contemplation. This theme of mutual respect comes back in the park episode, where Moomintroll once again calls Snufkin out on his behavior. Snufkin realizes the error of his ways and thanks Moomintroll for his warning, and the friends settle the matter with a friendly punch, showing that it'll take more than that to ruin their relationship. We then get to the last episode of the season, where the Hobgoblin comes back to the valley only to steal the sun. Moomintroll offers to go on a journey to find the star, and Snufkin chooses to help him out, actually sticking by his friend's side and dealing with the wizard instead of running away like the last time the Hobgoblin came to visit. The Hobgoblin had stolen the sun because he wanted to throw his own Midsummer party. The connection between the Hobgoblin and the sun is noteworthy because it continues the theme of pairing him off with things that glow, such as when he was seeking to regain ownership of the King's Ruby back in Season 2. There's also a moment in the previous season where Snufkin is talking about the wizard's possessive tendencies and represents that by snuffing out the sparks from a fire, as if the wizard could steal that light away too. This is also reminiscent of our good friend the Groke, who, as you might remember, also chases a light, usually in the form of a lamp that the characters are carrying. And at this point, it should be abundantly clear that the light is Snufkin. When the Hobgoblin possesses something, its light disappears. Snufkin doesn't want to be possessed because he fears his light will be snuffed out too. Moomintroll's possessive tendencies would bring him no future because he would just forever chase a light he could never reach, much like the Groke did. Because Snufkin would never let himself be loved by Moomintroll if he felt like his best friend was trying to possess him. Back in our story, the boys convince the Hobgoblin of returning the sun to the sky and even invite him to the party. They have their midsummer celebration, but Snufkin steps away from the crowd for a bit to watch the sunset. This echoes the scene in Season 1 where Snufkin leaves the party early. But this time, instead of sulking in a corner, Moomintroll goes to find his friend. As they chat, Moomintroll compares Snufkin to the sun, saying that he used to feel sad when Snufkin left, but he realized his absence was just like the sunset. Even though the sun disappears every night, we must trust that it will always come back, and it does. Snufkin remarks that's how he felt when the Moomin family left for the island, and he even remarks that they were gone for a very long time. Moomin Troll's comment clearly continues the trend of comparing Snufkin to the light. I mean, he just said his friend was like the sun. For Moomin Troll, the light is Snufkin. But for Snufkin, the light is Moomin Troll. When Snufkin in Season 1 has a nightmare about being forgotten, it is Moomin Troll's bedroom light that guides him back to the valley. When Snufkin tries to see Moomin Troll in November, it is the lack of light in his window that symbolizes Moomin Troll's absence. When he rushes back to the beach hoping to find him, believing that it was his boat coming up on the horizon, he stares hopefully at a light at the very end of the ocean. Moomin Troll compares Snufkin to the sun, but Snufkin says Moomin Troll is also like the sun, in the sense that he must trust they will always meet again. Their love is the same. The very nature of their feelings is the same. It's mutual. It's corresponded. Because deep down, Snufkin had always been a bit like Moomin Troll, even if he didn't let it show. He's always seen the valley as stability, much like Moomin Troll did. He missed his dear friend during the winter, much like Moomin Troll did too. When Moomin Troll comes back from his sea journey, he talks to Snork Maiden about it, and admits that while he was gone, he was afraid he'd been away for such a long time that everyone else would have moved on from him, which is the exact same nightmare Snufkin had in Season 1. They both want to be loved. They both want to be missed by the other. And they both are. Moomin Troll asks if Snufkin will stay by the cliff a little longer, understanding and acknowledging his friend's need for some alone time. But Snufkin replies that actually he'll go back to the party this time, allowing himself to be surrounded by people who love him. Because they have grown together, they have changed together, and they want to be nothing but together. What a fantastic season! Snufkin not only learned to face his responsibilities and consider the feelings of other people, but he is finally allowing himself to be loved by others and to express the love he feels in a more open and healthy way. His relationship with Moomin Troll grew stronger because of it, and now they get to bask on their newfound openness and sincerity. They love each other, and they always have. Where will their story go from here? Only time will tell. And future seasons, perhaps, if the gods are generous. But for now, I will enjoy how far they have come, and think of how much farther they can go if they stay together. Thank you for watching.
Well, hello there. It was very nice of you to watch this video. Special thanks to my beautiful patrons for making videos like these possible. You guys are the target audience for my spring tune. If you have enjoyed the video, you can also help me out by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell too. You can also share this video with your friends and follow me on Twitter, maybe? Twitter is blocked in my country right now, but I don't think it'll be a permanent thing, so I'll come back at some point. Feel free to leave a comment down below, especially if it is about how much you love Moominvalley. Also, I have a second channel. So far, it's just been a place for me to post Severance music videos, but if I ever make any extra content, it'll probably be there. So the link will be in the description, along with everything else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye! You gotta love this moment with the photo album in episode 3 where they're showing off different couples. Like, you've got Moomin Mama and Moomin Papa, Mimble and Brisk, Moomin Troll and Snufkin.